Oh, what? Yes. We need to hear it. It'll destroy the bond. There's actual bond between. Yes. I want to be on.
Are you okay?
Not worth it. Let's go here.
What's that?
Wait.
I'm 4 or 5. I'm going right next to the microphone. I'm gonna sit right here. And I'm gonna hang down so I can just ask a question. Go on, Ken.
Thanks.
So you can sit.
It's also big.
Yeah.
Imagine we lived for the final time. I'll be the only girl in the wedding team. I don't think anything else helpful. My notebook is running out. I'll take too much notes today. What is it about? Oh, it's of a career. I can memorize it. Yeah, I don't like school. I don't get to feel the person. Finish this. At least leave some space for the lecture tonight. After school. No, that's all right. No, after this. Are you going to panel day? Yeah, it's on the stage. I'm not going. I have practice. Tell me what you think about it.
Good afternoon, everyone. So how many people know what MIT time means?
MIT time?
Any MIT students here? What is MIT time? John? 5 minutes after the hour. It is now 6 minutes after the hour, so we're all late. But we're going to go ahead and get started anyway. Thank you for being early. So I am very happy to be introducing Becca Portman for today's seminar. The Patrick J. McGovern Foundation has been a huge supporter of the Beaverworks Summer Institute, making it possible for you guys to be here in some of these programs. They've got, it's a foundation that does some great work supporting development of AI for ethical applications, not just for, you can name it anything you want, but the applications are super. And I'm hoping that Becca tells us a little bit more about them. She's been working here in this Tech for Good space for a while. I'm just checking, hopefully you guys all had a chance to look at her biography. She's got 10 years of experience in the world of policy and data science, as well as nonprofits. So I'm gonna let Becca start here, but I also want to remind you that when she pauses for questions, Sigrid or I will be passing out the microphone for questions in the room, and she will be reading questions directly from the Q&A that get plussed up. So if you're in the Q&A for the virtual students, make sure you look at the Q&A and promote any that you think are good questions, because I'm sure there are a lot there. So, all right, Rebecca, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, hello, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Well, it's really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me today and for that intro. As mentioned, I'm Becca Portman. I am the Community Success Lead at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. And I'm going to share some thoughts today on how to navigate a career in tech for good, hopefully make the case that there are a lot of different ways to use your technical skills to have a positive impact on the world. I will start out by talking about what we do at the foundation. I will share some examples of partner organizations we funded. I'll discuss my role and talk about how our work fits into the broader tech for good space. I'll explain how I ended up here, my career path, and I'll share a few things that I learned along the way. So to share a little bit more about PJMF, PJMF is a philanthropic institution that's dedicated to advancing AI and data science solutions to create a thriving, equitable, and sustainable future for all. We bridge civil society, technical capacity, and human promise to drive human-centered technology creation, accelerate social impact, and solve global challenges. To put it simply, we fund mostly nonprofit organizations who are using AI, data, and technology to advance important missions and solve human challenges. The team that is responsible for distributing our funds is called our Strategic Capital Team. They use a hypothesis-based approach to ensure that the foundation's resources are maximally impactful. So the team regularly conducts landscape analyses to determine how to go about funding different causes. And every year they develop hypotheses in each focus area. This year we have 7 focus areas, ranging from climate and health to crisis readiness and education. In 2023, we distributed $66.5 million to 148 organizations around the world. We use an approach called trust-based philanthropy, which aims to increase equity between funders and nonprofit organizations by providing flexible funding, focusing on learning from the funding we provide, lowering barriers to entry for organizations, and providing wraparound non-monetary support. So I'll share a few examples of organizations we've funded recently. We call them our grant partners. The first organization I'd like to highlight is called New Public. New Public is a nonprofit that works with community entrepreneurs, researchers, engineers, and designers to envision healthy digital public spaces that strengthen democracy. Essentially, they're trying to create a more welcoming and community-oriented internet. And they do that by focusing on 3 strategic pillars. They build and champion innovative design patterns and practices to accelerate adoption of digital public spaces. They support leaders and organizations who ensure that digital public spaces are healthy and thriving. And they accelerate field-wide experimentation and learning. So one example of that learning is their civic signals research, in which they identified 14 key qualities of healthy online spaces and put together research that sort of other organizations could pick up when they're going about producing online spaces. Next, I'll talk about Climate Cabinet. The folks at Climate Cabinet were inspired by the fact that state and local officials across the US will be responsible for achieving 75% of the climate commitments that we made in the Paris Agreement. They have developed what they call Moneyball for climate policy, which combines data science and policy expertise to find and support local leaders who have big climate opportunities in their area. And they have a national scorecard, which is a data system that tracks voting records for over 10,000 politicians across the country, and then identifies under the radar, high climate IOI local government opportunities. And they then connect those most promising climate candidates with key resources and support to help get them elected. Lastly, I'll talk about Jacaranda Health, which is an international partner based in Kenya. They work with governments to deploy affordable and scalable solutions through government hospitals to improve quality of care and maternal and newborn outcomes. Their Prompts program is an AI-enabled digital health service that empowers expecting mothers to seek timely, quality maternal health care through a two-way texting exchange. The system uses natural language processing to triage incoming questions from women and provide them with answers quickly, while also elevating higher risk situations to the appropriate level of care. It also sends mothers text reminders and prompts to ensure that they don't miss important health milestones during pregnancy. The data from prompts is then fed into dashboards, which combine this real-time information based on questions from mothers with participatory research to monitor gaps in maternal health services at a system-wide level. So how do I fit into all of this? The strategic capital team, which is responsible for grant making, is part of our larger strategy and innovation team, along with our learning and insights lead, community success, which is my role, and we have an internal products and services team, which is a technical team that builds data products and provides consulting services to nonprofit organizations. Strategy and innovation is a new team for PJMF, and it was formed with the goal of allowing us to support organizations who are at different points in their journey of adopting technology and AI. So while many of the organizations we fund are fairly advanced in their use of these tools, these new functions focus more on supporting and upskilling organizations who might be earlier in that process, in addition to providing more robust technical and learning support to our grant partners. As the community success lead, I serve as a primary point of contact for organizations who we think might be a fit for consultation, training, or other non-monetary support. And since the team is new, I'm also working on designing internal systems to streamline our coordination and collaboration across the strategy and innovation team. And then I provide a variety of other project management support across internal initiatives and external partnerships kind of as needed. So I'm super happy to talk more about my work at PJMF or answer any questions you may have about our work to the best of my ability. I'm actually very new to the foundation. I just started about 3 months ago. So the second half of my talk is broader about Tech for Good. So I can pause now if folks have questions about the foundation specifically before moving on to the Tech for Good portion of the conversation.
What's your favorite part of the foundation that brought you there?
Very good question. My favorite part of the foundation, I think it's just that it's a really, really dynamic place to work. The foundation has been, to some extent, reinvented a couple of times since it was founded in 2020. It's because, technology is changing so rapidly. I think PJMF is constantly having to evolve itself to figure out how to meet the needs of various organizations. So I really enjoy the challenge of that and the idea that I can kind of come in with ideas and changes. I see changes happen.
What is your favorite cause that you supported? You said that this is a Tech for Good company. So what do you think that you have done that it has done the most good? Sorry for my word salad there, but yeah. Oh,
that is a really hard question. I think I'm probably precluded from playing favorites.
Okay, then if you, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. If you have another question, I need to think about it a minute.
If it makes it easier, you could pick the one that you think has done the most good, I guess.
I don't know that I know, since I'm so new. I don't necessarily have one. I can't say comprehensively this is the one that has done the most good. I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of our climate related partner organizations, and so those are organizations that I am really excited about, sort of the ability to use data and AI in the climate space. So Climate Cabinet is one that is doing really cool work. We have some partners in the UK who are called My Society, and they're doing really interesting work where they're building tools for folks to track sort of local government initiatives and kind of building sort of on the ground tools to empower people to do on the ground work. But yeah, I just don't have one off the top of my head that I could say is doing the most good, but it's a good question.
A couple of online questions from Bob. Is it possible for BWSI students and alums to be involved with the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation?
Interesting question. I don't know off the top of my head that we have sort of any sort of like volunteer opportunities. We do, I will say, we have a program for early career folks. So sort of right after college, we hire associates. And so that's a time where we have several folks who just started who are fresh out of college. And it's a really great way to kind of get exposure to the broader space. As students, I don't know that I can't think of anything right now, but I will share some resources later that are more targeted to students in the broader Tech for Good space.
So I was just curious, but when you said there's equity amongst the different grant companies that you were giving money to, how do you determine how much each company should get versus a different company?
Yeah, so since I'm not on the grant making team, I'm actually not involved in the sort of detailed discussions about how to determine how much funding is necessary. My understanding is it typically is sort of a conversation about scoping out a specific project and figuring out how much that project will cost, and then providing grant funding according to that. So it's really trying to figure out what are we going to accomplish and then match the funds to that.
All right, one more quick question, and then we'll continue to move on, Becca.
Yeah.
The question from one of our participants: how does the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation acquire the funding that they give to other organizations? Is it through donations?
So our funds come from Patrick J. McGovern, who, our namesake, who passed away before the foundation was created. He spent his career, he worked for the International Data Group, and that's a company that did a lot of work in the sort of technology and media space. They created Computer World magazine, and they also started the For Dummies books, if you ever heard of them. And he was really, really interested in sort of brain science and computer science while he was alive. And so when he passed away, his essentially family wealth was put into this foundation to be put towards these causes that were really near and dear to him. Okay, so I will continue on with the second half of my presentation, but thank you, those were really great questions. So to talk about tech for good, I first want to define what I mean by that. I think of tech for good as a pretty broad term, which describes the space where technology is being used to solve big social and environmental problems, or to bring about positive social impact. And when it's done right, tech for good puts people at the center. You will often hear tech for good and public interest tech used interchangeably. Those are really umbrella terms for work that is going on in the government. That's often referred to as civic tech, where they're using technology to improve public services. In nonprofits to advance mission-driven work. This is most of the work that we're funding, but we also fund some nonprofits who then support the broader goal of improving civic tech. There are also for-profit companies who are working in this space. So for example, Microsoft has a nonprofit-focused arm, as well as companies that designate themselves as B corporations, so they can seek both profits and some kind of public benefit. And then there's where I work, a tech-forward philanthropy that invests in tech for good. So when I think about job roles in the tech for good space or in technical industries more broadly, I typically divide them into two categories. Either you are a technologist, so you're an expert in a particular field of technology, such as a software engineer or a systems architect, and you are one of the people building the products and tools, writing the code. Or you might be in one of many, many tech adjacent roles. So these are jobs that are in technical fields or potentially at technology organizations, but they don't necessarily involve hands-on technical work. So examples are project managers, product managers, technical recruiters, and business analysts. My current role is a tech adjacent one, but I've spent a good portion of my career moving back and forth between these two categories. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I ended up here. I have a pretty atypical path to the sort of technology field. So I thought I would rewind to summer 2007 when, like you all, I was enrolled in a pre-college summer program at a big East Coast university. I took a course in leadership and law because I was really into mock trial in high school and I thought I wanted to go to law school. I had a really great time this summer and it got me really excited for college. I ended up attending Northwestern University where I studied social policy. And at this point in my life, I really didn't think of myself as a technical or quantitative person at all. In fact, I shied away from math, computer science, and other technical fields because they just didn't come as naturally to me as the humanities. I graduated knowing I wanted to pursue a career in policy or public impact, but to be honest, I didn't really know what that meant. So I spent the first couple of years after college kind of exploring different paths. I moved back to DC and spent a few years working for a healthcare consulting firm before quitting my job and traveling in South America. I knew that I was interested in going to graduate school, but I didn't know what I ultimately wanted to do. So in a very non-traditional move, I moved back in with my parents and took a series of internships to figure myself out. So I started out interning with the Public Defender Service in DC, but I ultimately found my happy place at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is a DC think tank that produces research on economic policy with a goal of reducing inequality. And CBPP is where I really started to fall in love with data. While all this was going on, I took the LSAT twice, ultimately decided law school probably wasn't for me, and started exploring degrees in economics. But I ultimately landed back at Columbia, where I enrolled in a one-year master's program called Quantitative Methods in the Social Sciences. So for me, this program was the perfect way to build up my quantitative abilities. I learned how to code and conduct data analysis using R. I took courses in data visualization, geospatial analysis, and data mining. And I graduated with a solid enough base to get hired as a research assistant at the Brookings Institution. So in case folks aren't familiar, Brookings is one of the oldest and most prominent think tanks in the world. And I started out there as an RA in their economic studies program, research assistant, I should say, where I produced quantitative analyses and visualizations to support economic research on a really wide range of topics. But once I started doing it, I realized I didn't see a long-term future for myself in research. However, I was really drawn to the other parts of the Brookings organization, sort of how it functioned as a nonprofit, how they thought about the impact of policy research. So I was able to leverage my data visualization skills to get a job still at Brookings, but in communications, which later morphed into working on essentially developing an institutional data strategy. So I built internal systems to track the work that our scholars did and the downstream impact of that work, really creating data which we could then use to report back to our funders and the general public, and ideally learn from that data in order to enhance our impact as an organization. Throughout this time, I was really active in the Brookings Data Network, which is a professional network that advocates for data needs among Brookings researchers. And I was a technology liaison, so I worked closely with our IT department to help improve our internal technology infrastructure. I ended my time as an impact manager with Brookings Metro, which is another program at Brookings that focuses on policies to build more resilient communities. So I loved many things about my time at Brookings, most of all, the ability to really continue to explore different career interests from within a really fascinating institution. However, after 7 years, I was ready for a change. So that's when I landed at PJMF about 3 months ago. And my experience with data, nonprofit strategy, and sort of a general ability to wear many hats, I think is what landed me in this role. I've really enjoyed my time with PJMF so far. In particular, I have valued the ability to build my network in the tech for good space. Most days I'm interacting with folks from nonprofits, from other philanthropies, and even for-profit companies. So it's been really incredible to just get to meet people and learn so much about this space. And I'm excited about my future at the organization and all the things I think we're going to be able to accomplish to advance the field. So mine is just one path. It may not be one that holds any appeal for you, and that's fine. That's hopefully good information to have. But I thought I would close out with some important lessons that I've learned along the way. And I will start with a caveat that I think you should keep in mind about all advice. This is a quote I read recently from one of my favorite writers. Most advice is bad because it prescriptively flows from personal experience that in many cases happened many decades in the past. My experience is not that many decades in the past, but it's far enough in the past that, feel free to ignore it. So my advice about advice is to think of it as sort of a river of ideas from which you can pluck things that resonate and let other things flow by. And if you try something out that doesn't work, just throw it back in the river and look for something else to try. I'll start with some advice on making the most of college. Just a couple things I wish I would have known going into college. First, when I was getting started, I don't know if this is still true, but when I was starting college, it felt like everyone always talked about how it was so much fun and it was going to be some of the best years of your life. And I wish someone would have told me going in that the first few months of college are going to be pretty hard. This may not be true for everyone, but if it is true for you, just know it will get better. You will find a new rhythm soon enough. I encourage you to use college to get out of your comfort zone, take a random class just because it interests you, try a new sport, learn a new language. Don't just do this during freshman year, but every year. It might be hard to believe it at the time, but looking back, I think college is probably the best time to explore and expand your interests. So don't let that go to waste. I also wish I would have focused on trying different internships more during college. So I would have had a better idea of what type of job I wanted. Internships are a great way to figure that out. I encourage you to do a few, but I encourage you to also remember you can be just a college student. Sometimes you don't have to always be in an internship. Specific to pursuing a career in tech for good, a couple of thoughts. I have found that having technical skills is really, really useful, even if you aren't in one of those technologist roles. If you're tech adjacent, it's really helpful to be able to understand the process and the terminology that folks who are building the tools are using. And you might have the ability to also just build things for yourself to solve problems. If you're technical in a non-technical space, people will think you're a magician. So that's always fun. If I were starting my career over and I knew I wanted to end up in the tech for good space, I actually think that I would spend some time working for a big established tech company first before moving into public interest tech. And that's partially because a large company just has so many resources to do really good work and provide training and exposure that can be harder to get in a nonprofit setting. So I would probably do that and then take the things that I learned that I learned in the private sector back to the tech for good space to really make a big impact that way. That said, I didn't do that, and I fully believe there are many, many paths into this space and really any space you're interested in. I would think about your career as sort of a series of inflection points where you can change your trajectory at any point along the way. So college, grad school, boot camps, or just networking or taking online courses. It's really possible to reinvent yourself throughout your career. Zooming out a little bit more, I want to tell you it's okay to be interested in a lot of things, and it's okay to not have your entire life or career all planned out. I would say just figure out the next 1 to 3 things that you want to focus on learning and go from there. Over time, you'll figure out how all your interests connect. And like I said, it's never too late to change your path. When you think about that first job out of college, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be something you can stand to do for a year or two that gets you in the general direction of your long-term interests. And in general, every job is going to have some trade-offs. So it can be really hard to find one job that meets all your desires for both meaning and impact, salary and benefits, flexibility and quality of life. I found it takes trial and error to figure out what of those things matters to you most, how to achieve it. And that's just something that you sort of figure out over time. Lastly, leverage your network. The people you know are your most valuable resource. Don't be afraid to ask people for advice, introductions, or just to learn about their experiences. Most people like to talk about themselves and they'll be flattered if you ask. And if they don't respond or they reject you, don't take it personally, just move on. Lastly, some general thoughts on learning and self-improvement. This is a really important value to me, and it's something that I think has helped me to kind of navigate adulthood. First of all, I think of reading as the antidote to almost all of life's problems. If you're facing a life quandary, there's probably a book that can help. In college and when you're a student, it can be hard to find time to read for pleasure if you're having to do a lot of reading for work. But once you graduate, I encourage you to think of books as a resource for exploring and understanding the world. And a couple of topics that I found really interesting to help me navigate adult life: personal knowledge management. So we are just constantly bombarded by content nowadays. And if you want to find a way to store information that is useful to you so that you can reference it or share it in the future, I would check out this concept of personal knowledge management. There are a lot of different approaches to it, but it's helped me a lot. I've also found it particularly useful to learn more about psychology and organizational design. So really just trying to understand what makes people tick and how do they interact when you put them in a group. It's kind of a superpower, and I find it personally fascinating. And lastly, my mind was blown when I first learned about the idea of systems thinking. It's essentially a discipline that can be applied to almost any problem to understand how seemingly disparate things are all connected. And it's just a really incredible tool for problem solving. I'll close with a reminder to just have some fun along the way. I'm assuming that since you're doing a pre-college program at MIT, you're all probably pretty high achievers who work really hard, and that's wonderful, but you're also entitled to be kids now and to find time to rest and enjoy your life at every point along the journey. And in case this piqued anyone's interest, I wanted to leave you with some Tech for Good resources. So for college students, there is a program called PIT-UN, the Public Interest Technology University Network, which fosters collaboration between colleges to nurture civic-minded technologists. They have dozens of member organizations, but if you end up at a school that doesn't have a PIT-UN chapter, I believe you can start one. There's an organization called Develop for Good that brings together college students and industry professionals to build tech products for nonprofits. So this is a really great way to get some experience in the space while you're still in school. Coding It Forward is a 10-week summer fellowship program that's open to college students or recent grads. And then after college, I recommend the US Digital Corps, which is a 2-year fellowship that places early career technologists at federal agencies. Finally, if you're interested in learning more in the short term, these are 2 books that I highly recommend on the topic of public interest tech: Power to the Public and Recoding America. They're both really fascinating reads and pretty quick reads, and I enjoyed them a lot. So that is my last slide. Thank you all for your attention. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
Thank you. We'll do 2 remote questions, then we'll open it up to the floor. The first question is, how would a nonprofit apply to Patrick J. McGovern Foundation? And is there any way or tips for applying to such foundation?
So we actually don't accept applications because of the way we do our funding. Our strategy analysts who are on the strategic capital team go out and proactively look for organizations who are really the best fit for the hypotheses that we have come up with. But when folks do reach out to us just via email, I'll like if someone emails me, I'll pass it along to that team. But yeah, we actually don't have sort of a formal application process for nonprofits.
All right, thank you. What are some examples of skills that tech-adjacent people should have that could benefit them?
That's a really excellent question. So beyond sort of having technical skills yourself, I think a genuine curiosity about the process of creating tech. I think design skills are really, really valuable for tech adjacent folks. That's sort of a general approach to thinking about building anything, and particularly human-centered design is really valuable. And then I think communications skills are really, really helpful. I find that I think I'm able to provide a lot of value by sitting in sort of an intermediary space between our technologists and folks who are less technical. To be able to sort of explain things in layman's terms is really, really helpful, and we need more people who can do that type of thing.
So, as a well-established organization with broader goals which span across like throughout the world, I was wondering if you could offer some insights into the role that like international stakeholders, particularly such as those in the UK, may play when it comes to achieving your goals.
The role that international stakeholders play when it comes to achieving PJMF's goals, I mean, I would say that this is my, I'll take a stab at this question, but this may be a little bit beyond my knowledge of our overall strategy. We generally try to really look beyond a sort of US centric view of technology. So we are really trying to center non-North American sort of global voices in this conversation, because that is so important to the conversation about technical and AI kind of equity. Sort of as you see technology developing, it tends to benefit sort of the whitest, richest people in the world. And so we heavily focus on trying to have representation and hear the voices of folks who are outside of that. So that's the sort of general approach to it. And that is sort of infused into every conversation that we have. Hopefully that addresses your question. I don't know that I have a specific question about or answer to the part about the UK.
Hi, so you mentioned the personal knowledge management. I was wondering if you had any examples of personal knowledge management strategies for storing information.
Sure, yeah. I actually here I can. This is a book called Building a Second Brain. I don't know if this is backwards for you guys, but Tiago Forte writes about, he has an approach to it called Para, where it's basically just different ways of organizing content by the active projects that you're working on, and then sort of the areas of your life. So he has tons and tons of free resources if you just search for I'll put it up again, for Tiago Forte. He's really good. And then there are a couple of other systems. I think it's called the Johnny Decimal system. That's kind of interesting approach to sort of like structuring like the way you save content. I haven't looked into that one as much, but yeah, my favorite is Tiago Forte and the Para method, and his book is Building a Second Brain.
So this might be similar to an earlier question, but is the foundation like a finite amount of money that you're looking to spread for a positive impact over a number of years? Or are you looking to constantly be regenerating the wealth that you're giving away in order to keep giving for years and years and years?
So my understanding of the way wealth like this works is that essentially a certain portion of it is invested, and so it will continue to grow. And so we distribute some portion of it each year, but the kind of endowment aspect of it will continue to exist over time. So the same way like a university has an endowment that they invest in certain areas so that it can just earn interest over time, we have that with the foundation's funds as well. So as far as I'm aware, there's no sort of aim to raise additional funds. It's just once you have accrued a certain amount of wealth, it kind of perpetuates itself into the future.
So you mentioned that you think it's important for like high school and college students to have fun, like because they're children or they're kids. What do you do for fun?
great question. So I have a dog. I guess you actually can't see her because it's a little blurry, but I spend a lot of time just like to walk my dog. You actually also might also be able to see, I'm very into sort of like crafting type stuff. So I've recently got it into diamond painting. And I just spend time with my family. I think that I honestly, some of those things are things that like I could do a better job of, but it's something that is sort of something I try to infuse more of into my life.
What are some implementations of tech for good, like real world?
So real world implementations of tech for good. I mean, so the partner organizations that I mentioned, I think are all examples of implementations of tech for good, where these are nonprofit organizations who are either building technology products or they are helping to support the like improvement of existing technology products. It's in the civic tech space, you can think of like any kind of government website is an implementation of tech for good. So healthcare.gov is sort of the original kind of, it didn't go so well the first time and it had to be redone. But it is technology that people need in order to get their healthcare. So there's all sorts of applications of it. Another example I've been learning about more recently is sort of the applications of geospatial data for good. So we have a partner called Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, and they help to basically fill in the gaps in our understanding of how basically our map of the world is not fully complete. And so this is an organization that has people on the ground who are helping to fill in the details about what do sort of local areas, particularly in less developed regions, look like, so that we have maps of the world, so that we're then better prepared for weather crises and other events that might happen. So those are just a few. There are, many iterations, many ways to imagine how technology and human needs can overlap.
So you mentioned how, like in your career path, you focus on like your first 2 years working like on a big technology company, and then when you get to like a policy focused place, you're kind of like a magician in front of other people who aren't technologists. How do you propose like in that stage of your career, do you keep sharpening your technical skills? Because I feel like you're not really doing as many technical things. How do you keep updated and still be relevant?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's honestly something that I feel like I grappled with and continue to grapple with being in the nonprofit space. When I was at Brookings, I was essentially self-teaching myself how to code in various languages, how to kind of set up certain systems for us internally. And so I had to carve out time. Sometimes I had the time to do it during the day. Sometimes I'd have to do it outside of work to teach those things to myself, to seek out resources. I think there are some great organizations who support people who are in kind of public interest tech spaces. So if you do end up at a nonprofit organization, there's an organization called N10. So I don't know if it still stands for this, but it's Nonprofit Technology, I think, Engagement Network. And so they have a conference every year, and they put out training for folks who are in the nonprofit space to help kind of keep them up to date, and you're connecting with each other and can help you to kind of combat there are similar struggles that folks who are in the nonprofit space and also in the technology space can face, because you are often resource constrained. So seeking out resources like that to make sure that you are continuing to learn. But I do think that it is, when you're in the public interest space, and I'm sure it depends on the organization. Like I was at a place that was not highly technical, but if you were to go to a nonprofit or another organization where you have a team of technologists who you're working with, you would probably have more internal support for that. But if you're in that kind of like, I'm the only data scientist at this organization role, you really do have to go outside of the organization to figure out, how am I going to support my learning? How am I going to keep growing? And it's somewhat of a personal determination, I think, when it makes sense to continue on at that organization versus go somewhere else so that you can really learn more.
Thank you. Now we're switching to another online question. What resources do you recommend for learning psychology and organizational psychology? So specifically, do you use personality types? What authors or books have you found helpful?
Oh, that's interesting. I am not a super strong proponent of personality types. And I think that more of the resources that I have found interesting about psychology and organizational design have been, I actually have a couple of podcasts that I really love in those spaces. On the organizational design front, there is a podcast called At Work with the Ready. This is like, I think this is very much, you kind of have to be in a workplace to start to get it, but they talk a lot about kind of the dynamics of an office and ways to be more intentional about how to structure things. Like you will probably come to learn that many jobs are just being in meetings back to back. And so how do we design a workplace so that it can be not that? That's really fascinating to me. And on the psychology front, I don't know if I have a specific book to recommend. There's a podcast on that I like as well, but it has a not safe for work word in the title. So I won't share it, but I appreciate the question.
Just to better contextualize like tech for good, what are some examples of like tech for bad or like tech for not good that you wouldn't recommend?
I wouldn't frame it as things that are not explicitly tech for good or tech for bad. I would point potentially to some of these large tech companies that really prioritize profit over sort of the effect that their technology is having on individuals and society as a whole. So, you've probably all heard the kind of dialogue around social media and, how various platforms are having negative psychological effects on people or influencing elections in negative ways, things along that line, where essentially, decisions are made, and often, the people who are making those decisions know that there's a negative impact, but the point of the organization is to make money, and it's not to think about the impact on people. Whereas Tech for Good is really an organization that is intending to have a positive impact, and where decisions will be made to shape things in that direction.
Going back to the part where you talk about for someone that wants to work in like the public interest tech space, you advise them to first work at a big established tech company. How long do you think they should spend in that big tech company before moving into a tech for good space they want to pursue?
I don't know that I can get that prescriptive about it. And this is sort of just for me, it's kind of a counterfactual idea of, if I could go back, that's what I think that would have been an interesting and valuable path. I think that the thing to keep in mind, the advice I was often given with being interested in a public interest career in general, because a lot of people, like when I was interested in law school, people would say, go work for, a big law firm for the first couple of years to kind of get experience and also pay off your debt. But it's easy to get comfortable in that space, and it can be really hard to make the change out of it. So I do think it's probably a good idea to give yourself a set number of years that you will do it, so that you don't just let it drag on forever. And maybe if you are doing it for financial reasons, it would be valuable to think on that front of like sort of how long do I need to pay off my debt? But yeah, I mean, In general, I think my advice is that you can't get that prescriptive. I would never say like, do this for exactly 18 months and then go do something else. You really have to kind of constantly be feeling out how you're feeling about your career, how you're feeling about your specific job, and whether what you're doing on a day-to-day basis aligns with your values or is getting you in the direction of aligning with your values. And you should be able to kind of develop that muscle to reflect on it and determine when the time to change is right. It's different for everyone, I think.
You mentioned how big tech companies weren't always looking at the impact that their things were having. I've read a decent amount of books on this, Bad Therapy, The Anxious Generation, and Amusing Ourselves to Death. I was wondering, do you have any book recommendations about that topic?
Oh, I think those are some of the best ones. There's something called Hooked by Nir Eyal. I actually haven't read it, but I know it's on that topic. But I don't have any others. It seems like you've done quite a bit of reading on it already. Oh, actually, I do have one. It's Weapons of Math Destruction. That is about how algorithms can be kind of used against people.
All right, thank you. At this time, we're going to move to our t-shirt presenters. If we could please pin our t-shirt presenters. Tisha Banks and Alina Zhao.
Hi, Ms. Portman. My name is Alina, and I'm from Remote Sensing for Disaster Control of BWSI. I really like the part where you mentioned strategy, capital, learning, insight, and also other advice on developing our technical skill while being a kid as well. Also, do some internships for future career decisions.
Hi, Ms. Portman. My name is Tisha Blanca, and I'm a student at the Remote Sensing for Disaster Response course here at BWSI. I truly enjoyed the presentation you gave, especially the first part, where you focused on the intersection of technology and policy. Specifically, I was intrigued by the role that the McGovern Foundation's partners, such as the Climate Cabinet, for instance, play in influencing the policy landscape. Thus, on behalf of the BWSI program, we would like to thank you with this BWSI shirt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Can we pin Becca back? Thank you from Beaverworks. We really appreciate having you. We're going to move into our announcements for today. So for virtual and in-person students, this is a reminder that your student testimonial videos are due tomorrow. Please get those in. And also, for social media, guys, we cannot friend you on any form of social media, LinkedIn included. So if you request this on LinkedIn, we have to deny. It's going to be, this applies to your instructors, this applies to your TAs and Beaverworks staff. Those are all the announcements I have for in-person and virtual. Virtual can head out. I have some more for just in-person.
Recording stopped.